Thanks, Derek. Okay, welcome everybody to the ML Utah meetup. I'm so glad to see you. This is the second meetup of the year, and I'm really excited. We have a little bit of momentum, 2 in a row. It's been a minute since we've had 2 in a row. I want to thank our speaker, Matt, for volunteering to speak on short notice. We are LinkedIn connections. I think we chat occasionally through comments on LinkedIn. So he volunteered and reached out. So as we begin, I just want to have a couple notes. If your company is hiring or you're looking for a job, we ask that you put everything in the jobs channel. That it's kind of an informal job board we have running on the Forge Slack. I'll make sure that link gets in the chat. So feel free to check that out, post jobs, or check out the jobs we have there. There's about 15 open job recs in that Slack channel. So feel free to check those out. Also, I'm always looking for speakers. We have them on paper call. I have 2 meetups that currently have call for papers open, and we accept first-time speakers, anybody willing to speak. And without further ado, I'll turn the time over to Matt. He's going to be talking about effective strategies for getting data jobs. He speaks a lot. He did streams for Advent of Code on LinkedIn. He's got books. He's I don't want to say vilified. That's a horrible word to say, but that's the only word in my head. But he's a good resource.
Infamous.
Infamous is better. Yeah. Infamous source of information. Should be a great talk. So go ahead. Time's all yours.
Okay, thanks, Mariah. Thanks, everyone, for having me. Let me share my screen here. Okay, so my sharing should be popping up here. Hopefully you can see it. Hopefully you can hear me. Can I just get a thumbs up or something if people can hear me? Or someone say yes in the chat that we can hear you.
I can hear you great.
Okay, audio is good. Awesome. Okay, so I'll get started here. So this talk is a talk that I'm calling Fizz the Buzz, and it's about getting a tech job. So a little bit about me. As Mariah said, I'm, I guess, infamous in some places. I work at a company called MetaSnake that does corporate training and consulting in Python and machine learning. And I've been using Python since 2000. That's when I graduated from college. And I've been basically working in the data space since. And so I've worked in a couple different companies. I got my degree from Stanford, but I'm originally from Utah. And so I relocated back to Utah in the mid-aughts. And so been here for a while. A little bit about my company. MetaSnake does corporate training and consulting in Python and data science. So I guess there aren't supposed to be any sales pitches here, so I'm not going to pitch it per se. I'll just say that if you're interested in getting your team leveled up, come talk to me. I'm more than happy to talk to you. Let me just maybe preface this talk a little bit. I got the speaker papers, and they said that they need to be technical talks. And so I did give... I speak a lot, and I gave a talk about a year or so ago, maybe a little bit more, I guess a little bit more than a year ago. And it was a talk with a similar flavor to this. And I got the feedback here. You may or may not be able to see it. One of the comments on the talk was that was the worst event I ever attended. So if you're expecting like deep technical advice, I don't really have much here. So full disclosure, I'm not really going to get into that. I mean, if you want to like talk about like the pros and cons of Emacs versus Vim or tabs versus spaces, we can get into that later. But this is I would say it's the talk that I wanted when I was trying to get a job, or even when I had a job and I wanted to get a new job. I mean, and like Mariah said, I have written a couple books. So, I mean, if you're interested in like Python or pandas or machine learning, I've written a couple books, and more than happy to talk about those things after if you want to. So the goal of this talk is to get a better job, and we've already got the rants coming in. Okay, so we've got there is at least one more person in the world that uses Emacs. So kudos, Adam. This talk was written in Emacs. So here's the basic outline. Here's where we're going to go. We're going to talk about what our goal is, and then I'm going to talk about some things that I find super relevant for getting a job. So our goal is to get a, quote, better job. And what do I mean by better? That can mean different things to different people. And what is a good job for one person isn't necessarily a good job for someone else. So what might make your job better? Maybe better pay, more part-time off. Maybe you want to use a different technology stack. Maybe you hate your commute. Maybe your hours. Maybe you're not a fan of your boss. Maybe you're not a fan of your colleagues, or not necessarily not a fan, but maybe you think, you know, they're better colleagues in other places, greener pastures. Maybe you don't like the location, right? So all of these things can lead to dissatisfaction or maybe unoptimized, maybe local maxima that should be maximized. So I came up with this job quadrant here, and we've got two axes here. I'm putting along one axis, I'm doing what I'm calling work, and the other axis, I'm doing what's called perks here. And so admittedly, like I said, this talk is aimed towards people who maybe are looking for a job. I'm imagining most people here, generally, well, a lot of people coming to meetups are looking for jobs, but usually people in meetups already have jobs. So I think the content of this focuses on both people who don't have jobs and people who do have jobs. So as you go over to the right, I'm saying that your work is more interesting, whatever that means to you. I mean, it could mean that your technology stack is more interesting, or that your colleagues are interesting, right? And then as you go up, I'm saying that you have better perks, whether that's PTO or commute or a stocked kitchen, that sort of thing. So your goal, if you're just starting out, is basically to get in this quadrant somewhere. And generally the easiest place to get in is that lower left. And I'm calling that get your feet wet area. And what you want to do is you want to move up and to the right. So, you know, if you just have a job that maybe is boring, but you're getting paid well or well compensated, I'm calling that an ad click job, that, you know, you're optimizing where people click on screens, which might be interesting to some people, but you might have really good perks doing that. On the flip side, if you have a really interesting job, but you're not paid very well, I'm calling that an educator. So ideally, you would want some arc or movement up and to the right there. So again, the two storylines here, if you're someone fresh, you sort of just want to get into this quadrant. Generally, that's the lower left. You're going to get the break there. If you're already somewhere on here, generally what you want to do is move into an upper right position there. So just a general note is that jobs can change at any time. And even if you're happy, if you're in the upper right-hand quadrant right now, just realize that your job might change, right? Pivots happen, your boss might leave, you might get acquired. All these sorts of things can happen. COVID might happen, and your boss, your job can change. So the thought here is just to be on your toes, and if you're ready and prepared, it can make it easier to handle these sorts of abrupt issues. So I've got, you know, the best time to get ready for the change is yesterday. I know, at least locally in Utah, like there are a couple of companies when COVID was happening last year that had some pretty big layoffs, and so that can be a challenge, right? And so if if you already have, a job in your back pocket, then that can be less of a problem. So, if you are in this position, I would consider that you make a list of jobs that might be interesting to you. Either, if you're a student and want to get a job, or you're looking to sort of transition into tech, what sort of job you might want, or if you have a job, what might be a better job, and how would that look? Okay, so let's talk about skills and dealing with the skills. I'm looking at the questions. I'm not seeing any questions. So if you have questions, feel free to ask them, or if you want to rant about Emacs, you can do that as well. So generally, people have a set of skills. And when you're looking at a job, there's also a list of skills on the job, right? And so I have this Venn diagram here where there's not necessarily complete overlap. There's a gap there of what you have and what you might need for a job. The question that I commonly get from especially newbies or people who are looking to break in, they're like, do I have to have all the skills? And an interesting stat that I found is that generally ladies will only apply for jobs where they have 100% of the skills listed, whereas men will, if they have 60%, they'll apply. And so I'm not really going to get into like gender roles here, but what I will say is my takeaway from this is that you should take the list of skills on like a job app, like a job description, and sort of like throw it out the window. I mean, some of those are pretty fungible, and I mean, I feel like I have a pretty good eye for looking at things and seeing what is really necessary and what was sort of put in there by a recruiter or some HR person just to like pad spacing in there. So once you've got your gaps, you want to figure out, how are you going to fill in those gaps? What skills do you need? And then you need to learn those gaps, and you need some way to showcase those gaps to others. Okay, Emacs and evil mode. Okay, so we are completely off topic in the chat there, but that's okay. We can talk about evil mode later. So one of the best ways I've found to get a foot in the door or to make quick progression is through mentoring. Someone who's been down the path before can be super useful. A lot of times this can be a colleague at work. Sometimes it can be someone at a meetup, or someone that that has experience and is willing to share. And sometimes this is someone that you pay for them to help you out. Question from Adam. Adam says, what if we're so clueless about the industry that we can't tell when it's an important job requirement or not? Yeah, so again, Adam, I guess my answer to that would be find a mentor. Also, a lot of times, the techniques that I'm going to give here sort of give you inside access to the people who are hiring, and you can just ask them directly, right? And so don't be afraid to reach out and ask them directly. Mariah says, what do you suggest for finding a mentor? I know there were services and stuff, but I've struggled in the past. Yeah, this can be a challenge, right? I mean, there are people who offer coaching and that sort of thing. And maybe I'll get back to this I do have a part on networking, and maybe we can sort of circle back on that on networking. So I'm going to maybe pop the stack on that and maybe come back to that in a bit. Lisa says being a mentor to others might put you in the space to find one yourself. And I think that's a really great insight, Lisa, in that generally, what goes around comes around. And if you are willing to help others, generally others are willing to help you, especially if you've connected with them. They sort of see that you're providing value and might want to return the favor. So let's sort of pop the stack maybe on mentoring for a little bit. Great questions there. And maybe we can address those in a bit. I want to talk about, if you've got your skill gap, how do you overcome those? And I've got a quote here that a goal without a plan is just a wish. And I've sort of found that, a lot of times at the start of the year, everyone will do their New Year's goals, and you'll just sort of think what your New Year's goals are, and then you won't even look at them for another 365 days or whatnot. But if you're serious about a goal and you're serious about doing something, then not only do you write it down, but you like look at it, if not every day, like weekly, something like that. And so, like, for example, one of my goals for this year is to make a new course for my website every month, right? And so we're in month 2. I've already released 2 courses this month, but I think I'll be pretty successful with that because I've already got all the courses that I want planned out, and I'm actually I basically visit that goal every single day and figure out what I'm going to do on that goal. So I feel like that should be a pretty good goal for me to reach. However, if I just sort of said that that was a goal at the start of the year and then like I didn't think about it at all, I think that would be a lot more difficult. So I'm not going to really get into too many more strategies of like goal setting or whatnot. There are a lot of books and material on that, and people have different, styles or flavors of getting things done, that sort of thing, which I think, you should find something that works for you. But I do consider, writing it down and revisiting it. If it's important to you, you will focus on it rather than just imagine it. I've got another quote here from Dickens. It says, "The most important thing in life is to stop saying I wish and start saying I will. Consider nothing impossible, then treat possibilities with probabilities." And I think this applies not only to like skills you want, but where you want to be, envisioning where you want to be. So what's the most effective way to learn? And so I wrote a blog post about this a little bit ago about what I think are the best ways to learn Python. And being someone who works with data, I came up with this decision tree that's probably really small and you can't really see it. You can go to my blog and see that. But basically what it comes down to is this list here, which I'm listing in order of effectiveness. So if I want to learn something, I think the most effective way to learn something is with a coach, someone who's been there before and can walk you through it. And again, full disclosure, like I literally sell snake oil for a living. So this is what I do. I coach people and help people learn, generally like corporate teams learn Python and data science, analytics, visualization, those sorts of things. That I think that's super effective, especially for like one-on-one type things. Also workshops where you have a team. I think if you want to level up a team, a workshop where everyone's doing the same thing at the same time is a great way to get everyone on the same page. Barring that, I mean, a lot of companies invest in that, and I work with those companies, and people really like that, and it's evident that they learn a lot at the end of that. Barring that, you're sort of at that point, you're sort of on your own, right? And so a lot of companies, some will give you time or money to learn, others won't, and so you just sort of have to figure out how you're going to invest that time. So this is my rank ordered list of ways to learn. I think a project is a great way to learn. And one way to hack this is if you got a project at work and you can learn some new technology by doing that, that's a great forcing function for you to do that. Another way is if you've got some hobby that you're interested in programming or using that hobby relative to some new skill, tying those together can also be a good motivating factor for you to learn it. I think online courses are great as well. Books are good. Books and online courses are both effective because they have someone who has thought out a path, a learning path, and sort of they're taking you through that end to end. I think sort of the drawbacks there is there's not really a carrot dangling. And so, for example, with coaching or workshop, you've got to go to that or you're paying money for that. And so that's a draw for you to do versus a book or an online course. You might have paid for it, but a lot of people don't have the motivation to do that. And then there are a lot of people who don't have the money or whatnot for a book or an online course. And so that's what these final things are, like YouTube, blogs, Twitter. I think there can be nuggets out there and this can be great for learning small parts of things. And even, I mean, there are some free courses and whatnot, books and videos on YouTube. But I think generally those are less effective than the ways above that. And I mean, I think you can learn on Twitter as well, but there's a lot of noise that you have to decipher to get the signal there. Once you've got skills, then just having them, I don't think is sufficient in today's age. If I've got 2 candidates that I'm looking between and they both list the same skills on their resume, the one who presents them better is someone who I'm going to pay more attention to. So you need to find some way to showcase your skills. And some advice I would give, and so I get to this again when I talk to the networking part, but consider reaching out to the hiring manager or the person who's responsible for hiring and showing what you've done, right? And that might be like making a website or making a PowerPoint presentation or recording a video. I think recording a video these days is a very effective way to stand out as a candidate, because we live in an age where video and asynchronous communication is super important. So if you have those skills, that can be really good for standing out as a candidate. And sadly, resumes are still a thing these days. You should consider getting some advice on your resume, especially if you're going the old school route of just spamming your resume to a bunch of people. If that's the way you're looking to get a job, you want to make sure that your resume is as crisp and clear as possible. And even if you're not going the old school way, you still should probably spend some time overhauling your resume. I'm not going to really get into that. There are courses and advice on doing that as well, but just consider that your resume from 4 years ago probably isn't good enough for today getting a job. So summary for your skills gaps: you need to do some soul searching and figure out where your gaps are. And again, someone who's been there can often help. And then you need to learn those skills and then have some project or something to show them and to showcase that to others. Let's talk about networking. I'm not seeing any other questions here, so I'm going to go to the next section, which is about networking. And I asked my Twitter following what their best networking tips were, and these are the responses I got. So use SSH config files, check your DNS settings, and try unplugging the router. So these are actually good tips for networking. I mean, as the token family computer person, in my family, I often get tasked with doing these networking types of things. I imagine many of you do as well. But I think we can sort of twist these a little bit and make them apply in sort of the not just computer networking, but people networking as well. So SSH configuration or keys, if you're not familiar with them, they allow you to log on to systems very quickly without typing in passwords and whatnot. And I'm going to liken that to streamlining the application process for a job. If you already have connections with a person who's hiring, that can make it really easy to get your foot in the door and get a job even before a job is posted or other people know about it. Also, DNS is how computers can talk to each other, and they sort of make these bumps as computers are talking to each other. But if the job you want is at that green dot and you are at the red dot and you've got to go through 3 layers of middlemen to get there, that's going to be a less effective strategy. However, if you can network and connect directly to the green dot or one level away from it, it's going to make it easier for you to get that job. And then the notion of router, I mean, computers are finicky, humans are finicky. When computers mess up, oftentimes I reboot them. So, I mean, I've got a Mac here, I've got a Linux machine over here, I'm using Windows right now. And sadly, even in this day, I often reboot my machines, once a day or so. I mean, generally Linux, it can go a little bit longer, but these other machines, things just go bad, and the easiest thing to do is to reboot them. And so similarly, in a human networking environment, things can not necessarily go bad, but people are busy, people maybe forgot about something, and there's a whole bunch of things on their list of things to do. And so, just coming back and repeating yourself or pinging them again, rebooting the conversation. I mean, I did that today I had some potential clients who a month or so ago had asked for some training, and I told them, this is what I can do and this is when I can do it, and my schedule's filling up now, and so I'm revisiting that potential clients. I'm like, hey, if you want to get in the training, I mean, my schedule's getting booked. You need to start moving on that, right? And then they responded after like a month of silence. So this is something that's, just a useful skill to have. Another thing is just communication skills, talking to people in general, especially if you're getting started. I would consider learning the skill of listening, and that can actually help with your networking, especially for people who tend to be a little bit more introverted and not necessarily want to network per se. If I'm going to a conference and I just go up to someone and start talking to them, they don't necessarily care about me. People generally like to talk about themselves, but they don't necessarily, unless you're someone famous, they don't really, I'm just going to say it, they don't really care too much. And so you can leverage that. Instead of talking about yourself, you can ask them questions about them, right? And so, especially if you're getting started and maybe you're trying to network with a hiring manager, you can go up to them. Maybe you have a copy of your resume and you say, hey, what advice would you give me, or what do you think about this? And this just, after they say something, you can repeat that. This is a nice little hack, especially for people who are introverted, to sort of introduce themselves to others and build their network. So my advice would be for people, especially at the beginning of their career, is to consider listening more than talking. And then once you have some experience, you can start to share that experience, right? Where you share it at a meetup or on a blog or Twitter. But, if you share experience and you don't have any experience, or you share erroneous experience, that can sort of backfire. But this little plot I made here, the listening versus experience, doesn't end here. It sort of turns into a smile here. I think as you get more experience, you get into sort of a leadership or management position. And then I think you should go back to listening again. You should surround yourself with people who know what they're doing, who are smart, and then you should ask them questions and listen to them, listen to their advice, and let them be autonomous. People are going to work better that way. So another question I get sometimes from people is like, is it better to have a big network, or is it better to have a better quality of network? And so again, I'm making a quadrant here. I seem to like to make quadrants, so maybe I should make a quadrant of quadrants. But my advice is that quality is better than quantity. So I can literally go out and pay for 10,000 connections on Twitter or whatnot, and it's not going to do me any good. Now, there is some notion to, like, if you have a large network, there are network effects where you can leverage that, and if you have a large network, it will in turn broadcast that message out more. But generally, if you have good quality connections, you're going to, and you're helping other people, you're providing value to your network, your connections are going to provide value to you. I mean, just an example, in the past 2 days, I've basically gotten 2 job requests or job offerings where people are like, hey, Matt, I want you to do this. And I'm not even looking for a job right now, but those are because of my network, right? And these are people who know me, they know what I can do. And, maybe I'll be able to help them out more as in a consulting type role or as an advisor role. But alternatively, these could be interesting jobs, if I happen to be in the job market or looking for a job. I'm going to pause it here for a minute and look at the questions that are coming in. So Kathy says, a lot of software engineers have project portfolio. Do data scientists need a portfolio that can showcase their skills? If so, do you have suggestion for what kind of projects we should put in our portfolio? It's a great question, Kathy. And I think similar to software engineering portfolio, I think data scientists should have a portfolio. It might be code, it might be notebooks on GitLab. If I was hiring someone, if they had a bunch of notebooks on GitHub, I think that would be impressive. I think what would be more impressive is if someone sort of went out of their way and just made a project related to the field that I was working in, and then push that out to me and said, hey, what do you think about this, right? Showing some initiative, not only that you have skills, but you've also tried to dig into, what our company is doing. I think that can be something that can be pretty useful there. Richard says, when I was searching for a job a few years ago, I would ask at the end of the interview, mostly if I felt like a no, I would ask where I could improve in the interview or the resume. I got quite a bit of feedback. Yeah, I mean, it's always good to get feedback, Richard. I would say that a lot of companies are really reticent to give feedback. So, I mean, if that you did get feedback is good. I guess, yeah, a lot of companies these days, they don't want to like tell you why they don't want to hire you. They just want to give you a no and sort of end it there just because of legal reasons. But I mean, what advice I would give, Richard, is you can even get feedback before, if leveraging your network, where you especially, you know, if you're fresh or if you have a connection to that person who is hiring. And a lot of times, I mean, right now it's a little bit more difficult in COVID times, but prior to COVID, like at most meetups, you'd have people who are hiring at the meetup and they're like, I'm hiring, come talk to me, right? And so if I was in that position where I was looking for a job, I would go up to that person, I would bring my resume to the meetup there, and I wouldn't necessarily pitch them per se, but I would say like, hey, I'm looking for a job or interested in getting a job. Here's my resume. What feedback do you have for me, or what am I missing, right? And sort of have that conversation even beforehand. Okay, so a little bit more about networking. So a lot of jobs aren't even posted. So if you like, one of the jobs that I just mentioned, like I was basically approached with 2 jobs. One of those jobs is posted on the internet. The other one was not, right? And so no, unless someone is in the network of this person, they're not going to know about it, right? Because they're not broadcasting it. They're handpicking through their network to find people. And, you know, I could be in a position to pass that on to someone in my network, right? If I knew, you know, this person is close enough to me in my network, we had a half-hour talk about what they're looking for, I could handpick someone or handpick a couple people to hand that off, right? And that's never going to be sort of, I'm not going to tweet about that necessarily or put it on LinkedIn. It would be very, you know, off the radar to say. Okay, another technique is using recruiters, and recruiters can be very good because recruiters are motivated to get you a job. Most recruiters are paid when you get hired. So there's a probably perverse incentive for them to get you hired. Just be aware that if you're giving multiple recruiters your resume, a lot of recruiters will just submit them to any place that's looking because they want to get the fee for you getting hired. And so if you're at a place where your resume has been submitted by multiple recruiters, that might backfire on you, because sometimes these companies will just throw out your resume because they don't want to deal with who gets the money and those sort of legal issues there. So just be aware that that can backfire. Be careful about or selective about how the recruiters are using your resume and representing you. And then the other thing is just that this is a funnel game for a lot of recruiters. I mean, most of you are probably aware, you probably get spammed with LinkedIn messages that say, oh, we saw this keyword on your LinkedIn profile, so you should apply for this job, right? That you're not even remotely interested in. So they're just doing a numbers game. They're just going to cast the net as wide as possible and hope to get someone who bites. But again, if you have that close network, or if you have people that you can leverage, basically you can jump into that funnel. Instead of being part of 1,000 people who are submitting resumes, you can sort of butt in line and be one of the 5 people who they're going to pull in for an interview. And then one more thing I would say, that, you know, if you're seriously considering getting a job, or if you're in the process of getting a job, I know that's super stressful, but consider not limiting yourself to getting one offer. I would try and get multiple offers. And I've done this multiple times when I've been looking for a job, getting multiple offers. The point is that if you have multiple offers, you're in a position of power in a negotiation where you can basically have these people play off of each other. And so that makes it very easy, rather than being in a position where I don't really like the salary, but I can't really say, I mean, I can ask for more salary, but if they don't give it to me, I kind of have to take what they offer me, rather than saying, this company is offering me 10,000 more. Can you beat that? Okay, so where should you network? I mean, you got your standards: LinkedIn, YouTube, or not LinkedIn, not YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter. I mean, your blog, meetups like this are a great place to network. A little bit harder in COVID times, but it's still possible. one place that people maybe not consider is your job. A lot of the people that you work with will probably be at different jobs in 5 years, and you might want a job where they are. So consider trying to network with those people. If you're a student, consider networking with your teachers and your classmates as well. A lot of teachers do have connections to internships, those sorts of things. And one other place that I think is great for networking is in your sports and hobbies. So when I was in the Bay Area, I played a lot of ultimate frisbee. Almost every day of the week, I would play ultimate, either lunchtime pickup or in leagues or clubs. And I mean, basically, I played with people from Apple 2 or 3 times a week. I knew people from Google, from Microsoft. Facebook wasn't around at that time, but basically every company in the Bay Area, I mean, I knew someone who played frisbee there because of that. And so, I mean, that might seem a little bit silly, but similarly, you know, if you've got a hobby or something that you like to do, consider networking with them. It can open some doors. Okay, and then I think one of the things about being a good networker is providing value to your network, right? And, you know, how do you do that? Share, help others. I think another way is to work in public. So, you know, if you're learning something, share about that. Generally, people who work in public, other people are going to want to network with you as well and be attracted to that. Okay, so summary, the best time to start building your network is now. Listen to others, especially if you're new, and then seed your network, right? And start providing value to your network. So let's pause a little bit for some questions that are popping up here. Okay, there's one from Adam. Adam says, how can I make sure I never get spammed like that? I mean, you can remove yourself from LinkedIn if you don't want to get like LinkedIn spam. It's just sort of the nature of the beast there. I don't like to talk too bad about recruiters because I have friends that are recruiters, but I mean, there are a lot of times I'm like, what is this recruiter doing, right? I mean, I feel like I would be a better recruiter than them, but I would hate being a recruiter. But yeah, that's just sort of the nature of the beast, is that this is a funnels game and numbers game. And a lot of these recruiters are just like, I'm going to cast my net as wide as possible. I'm going to search for whatever term I can. And the 1,000 people who match that, I'm going to spam them. So, I mean, that is what it is. And also note that, like, if someone's spamming you like that, generally that's a less effective way of getting a job, even though you might feel like, oh, someone cares about me. They probably are spamming a lot of people as well. So not necessarily the best way to get a job. I think better would be to reach out to a recruiter who sort of represents you or works with a couple companies and can sort of put your resume in front of a couple companies that way. Okay, let's talk about some soft skills. We've talked about, you know, hard technical skills and getting those hard technical skills. We've also talked about building your network. So what are some soft skills that might be useful for people getting a job? And I've kind of broken these down into 2 categories: communication skills and just sort of professional habits. So some of you might know Hugo Brown Anderson. He had a podcast and is known somewhat in at least Python data science area. But, you know, on his podcast, he commented, the vast majority of my guests tell me that the key skills for data scientists are the ability to learn on the fly and to communicate well in order to answer business questions, explaining complex results to non-technical stakeholders. So I've mentioned this a lot of times on social networks or whatnot. I think communication is one of those skills that's really underlooked, especially by a lot of people in technical fields. And that, you know, there's the stereotypical generalization that computer people just want to sit in their corner and drink Red Bull and work on a computer and not talk to anyone. And a lot of people can do that, but I mean, I think especially if you're coming in the data side, if you can have those communication skills and be able to speak business speak, you're going to get along a lot further. So here's a little hint I have, and that's that most pointy head people, most bosses don't really care about details, especially like numeric details. They care about aggregates here. So if you can sort of summarize and get to the point, those are the things that they tend to care about. So let me just give an example. If I'm running a candy store and the boss says, how are we doing today? The boss doesn't care that I sold 2 Jolly Ranchers to Susie and 3 Tootsie Rolls to Billy. And I could go through all the people who came in and everything they bought. My boss wouldn't care about that. They'd care more about, like, we sold $212 in total. The average purchase order was $5.32. We had 37 customers came in. Those would be the sorts of things. These are aggregates where we're collapsing that data down to a single value. So I think that's just a good rule of thumb when you're thinking about, communicating these sorts of things to higher ups. Generally, they want something summarized and not really going into the details, which a lot of technical people do. So just another quote on that, the last mile problem, right? Time after time it happens that some ignorant or presumptuous member of a committee or board of directors will upset the carefully thought out plan of a man who knows the facts simply because the man with the facts cannot present his facts readily enough to overcome the opposition. And this quote is actually from 1914, right? And so this is not a new problem, sort of the ability to communicate. So consider, what sorts of ways you need to communicate. There are a lot of ways of communication. So written communication, super important these days, especially with chat, Slack, email, being able to communicate by typing is super important. And so how do you get better at that? You practice that. You get feedback at that. I got to quote Richard Bach, a professional writer is an amateur who didn't quit. And so the more you practice it, the better you're going to get at it. And again, there are a lot of places where written documentation and the ability to communicate by written word is important. And if you have those skills, especially like if you're doing, if you're networking with other people, you're reaching out, you need to send a cover letter or your resume. If those aren't crisp or you've got typos or those sorts of things in them, that's going to leave a little dirty mark on you. Verbal skills, those are important as well, right? I mean, we live in a day and age of Zoom. And I mean, people don't talk on the phone as much as they used to, and they're not in person as much as they used to, but it still is important to be able to communicate as well. And then, especially for data people, it's important to have visual communication skills. Visualization is super important. I mean, I've literally found bugs in code by visualizing things that I don't think I would have found had I not visualized them. And some of my most, I guess, happiest training clients came from when they visualized something and just gave them insight into how their servers were being used, that they didn't really have, I mean, they sort of had an inkling of that, but the visualization just made that super clear, right? And for this company, which is probably one of the largest cloud usage of cloud computing in the world, I mean, literally millions of dollars from that insight they got. Also important to have good body communication, right? Being on Zoom, or if you're presenting, being able to communicate with your body can be really important. So other things I think are important, especially for the job search, are some of these habits here. I list patience, being prompt, and accepting responsibility. So let me just talk about these. I'll be like Tony Robbins here. You need to be patient. We live in a day of age where everyone wants everything now. And so, I mean, just, a week or so ago, there's this GameStop fiasco where everyone wants to be a day trader, right? And most day traders lose money. And so I think similarly with your career, you should invest in your career. You shouldn't day trade your career, right? So don't go after the short, quick hacks. You should invest in your career. Generally, when you invest in something in the long run, it grows and you get better at that in the long run. What about being prompt? What do I mean by that? I think this is a good skill that a lot of people don't have, and I'm just calling that leave the ball in their court, right? And so I kind of alluded to this before. If you send an email and you think, okay, I sent an email, they haven't responded, I'm done. I mean, you can take it that way, but most people actually like getting, like, not necessarily spammed, but reminded that they owe you something if they forgot it, right? And like the example I gave today of a potential client that I emailed after a month, they responded to me after I did that, right? And so you can do the same thing when you're networking or when you're looking for a job, right? You know, if the hiring manager doesn't reach out back to you, ping them. That's not going to hurt. So just leave the ball in their court. Don't have them waiting for you. I think that's going to leave a bad taste in their mouth. Rather, you be waiting for them. And then the next point here is just radical acceptance and responsibility. So the man who complains about the way the ball bounces is likely to be the one who dropped it. So my point here is that, like, if you're in a job that you don't like, whose fault is that? It's probably your fault. If you don't have the skills that you want, whose fault is that? It's your fault. If you don't have the network you want, it's your fault. So you are in charge of yourself, and you need to be responsible for that. Contrary to popular belief, the HR department at your work is not there to make you happy or necessarily looking out for you. They're looking out for the company, even though they might not say that. They have basically a fiduciary responsibility to the company, not to the employees of the company. They are not responsible for your career. You are responsible for your career. So in summary, consider your communication skills and your interactions with others, and some of these hints and tricks that I gave you. Consider whether you're, using those to your advantage, or you're actually doing some of these things that might leave a bad taste in other people's mouth. Let me just see if there's any more questions here. Richard says, I don't feel it's a bad thing getting spammed by recruiters. They're just open opportunities. It also means that you meet some sort of criteria that's desirable. Okay. Adam says, I could block recruiters, send them nasty gram every time until they leave me alone. Yeah, I mean, generally recruiters, I mean, the ones who are spamming you, I mean, they don't really care about you. So, I mean, you could waste your time like trying to like respond to them, but they're going to just, I mean, you're like one of millions of people that they're spamming, so they don't really care. Okay. Yeah. So Richard is saying they don't mind that. Yeah. And again, that can feel nice, right? Like someone's reaching out to you. I'm just here to say that, like, if someone's reaching out to me and saying, hey, I have this interesting Java work, it just indicates that like they haven't even looked at my profile, even though I have done Java in the past. I did it like 17 years ago, and I'm not interested in doing it now. And so the fact that, someone clearly has not read my LinkedIn at all and is spamming me for Java work is pretty off-putting, but it's also like, there's no way I'm going to do that role, right? And, or if they send you like, here's a junior role that we're hiring for, it's clear that they didn't even look at my resume at all. Or so, I mean, that can be, it's just a waste of time. Okay, and let's just talk about attitude. So a couple hints on I think what are good attitudes here. So I've alluded to this before. You have the power to create your future and you're living in it. I think this is really important to realize that, like, everyone thinks like the grass is greener on the other side, or in the future this will happen or whatever. But I think what's more important is to realize that, like, the future you want, you're living in it right now, and it's because of you and what you've chosen, right? And so if you're not happy about the way things are right now, it's on you. And so I mean, you can think about the future all you want, but the future never comes. You need to like basically accept responsibility for right now. I also think it's important to have an abundance mentality. This can be really hard when you're looking for jobs, right? And you're like, oh, there aren't very many jobs out there or whatnot, or my friend just got a job and I didn't. But it's been proven, like, if you are grateful, if you have abundance mentality, you're going to live longer. I mean, this also helps you sort of squeak in and look for opportunities where maybe there weren't there before. If you're the more positive type, if a job, you got rejected for a job, you can, reach out to the hiring manager and say, hey, thanks for considering me. Love to be in contact with you. If something pops up. I mean, I've had situations where I interviewed for a job, I didn't get it. And then the hiring manager reached out for me like a month or so later and like, oh, this person didn't work out, right? So, I mean, don't burn bridges that way. Also, consider surrounding yourself with others who are positive. If you are consistently negative, it's going to weigh on you. So comparison, on that note, like comparison is the thief of joy. There's always going to be someone who is better than you, right? There's going to be someone who's better at Python than me. There's going to be someone who's better at machine learning. There's going to be someone who's better at writing a book than me. Everything that I think that I'm decent at, there's going to be someone who's better than that at me. So I can spend my time like worrying about them, that they're better than me, but that's basically a waste of time. So if comparing yourself to others basically makes you feel bad, consider not doing that, and consider finding other things that will build you up rather than tear you down. You know, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. Similar, like the best time to build a network is when you don't need it 20 years ago. But the second best time is to start doing that now. So if some of what I've said has struck a chord with you, or you feel like maybe you're deficient in those areas, again, take that radical acceptance and make changes with that. And then I think, you know, we talked about the value of a network. You need to provide value to your network. If you're just in a network with 10,000 people and no one's sharing or giving value to it, you know, no one's going to reach out to you if you don't give value to it. So you need to find a way to give value. It's not necessarily monetarily, but there are other ways to give value as well. And I think this also includes like donating and being charitable with others as well. One thing I do like to do is for my kids' schools, I've taught classes on programming drones, on making ebooks, on doing machine learning and data science. So, I mean, I had a class of 3rd through 6th graders using Jupyter notebooks, right? I mean, that's pretty cool. And so, you know, do I get value out of that? I mean, maybe. I don't know if I'm going to get a job opportunity from that, but I think it is good when you put yourself in the foot of others and share and have abundance with others. And then just on the networking there, and the notion of being charitable with others, it's a small world, especially like the Utah tech community. You know, don't burn bridges, give people the benefit of the doubt, realize that like they probably think they're in the right too. So you'll probably see them in the future. And on the note of imposter syndrome, right? Like finding it, like it might sound like I'm like minimalizing like the stress of finding a job and getting a job. This can be super stressful. I realize that, right? I mean, I haven't talked about like all the job interviews that I failed, or, you know, the times I've flown around to different companies thinking that I did a good job and then just sort of fell on my face, right? It can be super stressful, super hard, especially if you have like a family or others who are depending on you. That can make you feel really bad, right? But realize that like a lot of like interviewing and the whole questions that they ask are sort of meant to push you to the brink and see like how much do you really understand, right? And so don't consider yourself a failure. I think, again, this is a place where a mentor can really help because they can sort of give you a third party, more objective viewpoint. I mean, some jobs you just might not be ready for. Sometimes you just have a bad day. But realize that, like, yeah, you're going to think that you might have bombed something, but that's not necessarily what the other side is thinking. Okay, so summary, be patient with yourself. Realize that, like, you know, there aren't really hacks. Be an investor, not a day trader with your career. Be generous, have a good attitude, help others. Also, don't compare yourself with others as well. Okay, and then to wrap up, yeah, if you're looking for a job, you know, everyone talks about goal setting. This is a place where you can apply goal setting, right? And you can write down your job that you want and then work towards that. And I do think, you know, if you make sure that you've got those skills checked off, or at least the minimal skills checked off, my experience has been that the easiest way to get a job is from your network, and the more you can leverage that network, the better you're going to be. And then, you know, consider that as much as we think that it's a meritocracy and it's all just hard skills, there are soft skills involved as well. And your attitude is going to determine where you go and how far you go. So that's my talk. If you want to reach out to me, I am at Twitter, __mharrison __ on Twitter. Alternatively, I'm on LinkedIn as well. But thanks for listening to me. I hope this was useful to you. If you felt that this was the worst event ever, apologize for the lack of technical content, but I do think that the content I've shared here, if you apply it, it will make you more effective with your job search or even in your current job as well. Let me just go through the questions a little bit more and open it up to other questions. Okay. So Richard says, when you practice in private, you'll be rewarded in public. I like that. That's great. Okay. Yeah. Open it up to other questions or comments if people have any.
No, maybe. Well, thank you, Matt. Unless someone ends up piping in with something, but yeah, thanks for your time and speaking with us. Feel free, everyone, to stick around, have general discussions with people, whatever you'd like. We'll just leave this meeting open for any of that.
Okay.
Hi, Matt. This is Brian. I really appreciate your talk. It's really been really inspirational, really super helpful. I'm more clinically trained person. I am a physician by training and got quantitatively trained just before the pandemic and have been actively involved with the COVID-19 response in the state of Nebraska and been really humbled at how important data science is, as most of us as physicians and as epidemiologists and as people in public health, we don't really have, we are not really quantitatively trained. I realize how important and what a deficit we do have in the clinical space when it comes to data science and using all of these tools. So I've really been kind of discovered a new passion for data science. I use R. I'm not a Python person, but it was really great to really follow. And I was wondering if you had some tips on ways to leverage that fear and to navigate that space.
To navigate, like just getting more skills, or I'm not quite sure specifically what you're asking.
Yeah, more about getting more skills. Most of the time, I think I would have great ideas, then I wouldn't know how to. I think this can be done. The software can do this. I think the software can automate this. The software can do this, but I wouldn't know how to. Oh gosh, I wouldn't know where to start from. But I think my level, I'm pretty decent, good in R. I'm pretty comfortable. There are a lot of things I probably don't know, but I'm not a starter.
Sure. Okay. So, I mean, awesome. Thanks for your question. So I think your question is like, I've got some projects and maybe I'm not quite sure how to get started or get going on them, but I think I could do them. And so, how can I sort of grease the skids to either try this out or see if it can work?
Right.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a saying that you'll hear a lot, which is that it's easier to take a subject matter expert and teach them data science than to take a data scientist and make them be a subject matter expert. And so kudos to you for being someone who's not like classically trained in statistics or data science, right? A physician, and coming in and trying to say, I'm going to take some of these skills and adapt them. I'm actually teaching a course at Stanford right now on data analytics, and sort of similar to like what you're trying to do. Most of the people in that class aren't programmers, nor do they want to be programmers, right? But they are subject matter experts. They might be doctors or PhD students doing research or working in industry, and they want to apply, some of these techniques to that. So what would I say? I would say first have some understanding of sort of, what you can and can't do with, some of these tools with machine learning. And then, once you have a basic understanding of what you can do, try and come up with, like I said, some hobby projects or something where you can test out this hypothesis or theory. When I'm doing a consulting gig for someone and they want me to, make a predictive model or whatnot, I generally tell them like, hey, there's no guarantee that this is going to work. What we're doing is what I call investing, and investing has risk, right? I mean, I might have a gut feel that it might work, but there's no guarantee. I don't even know what your data is like. Most people will say that their data is wonderful, and in practice, it's not wonderful or whatnot, right? And so a lot of times it takes a bit of time to invest in that and try it out. Some hints that I would give you, Brian, is to work in public. And so I would say the data science community and programming community in general, they are pretty open to working in public. So, sharing your insights either on social media or on a blog can be great. Consider platforms like Kaggle, where there might be sort of similar data sets doing something similar that you want. Maybe you can take existing code or existing projects and sort of riff on them or take them and adapt them to doing something similar that you want. So hopefully some of those ideas might be useful for you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to stand for this this fall just to get a little bit more quantitatively trained in R and SAS. So
Awesome.
yeah, so I'll probably do the first year remotely, hopefully, because I'm busy with in another state and stuff. But I don't know if I'll have a chance to take any class with you, but we'll see.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, good luck.
Yeah.
Okay. This looks like Richard might have a question here. Richard says, in the field I am in, we have millions of invoices that we are working on to train the system to help identify invoices with problems, as well as finding invoices that can be automatically improved. This will help free up resources for other tasks. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of where machine learning and AI can help is this notion of automation, right? Or things that humans might be fungible at, whereas computers might be less fungible or able to make better decisions given the same data or maybe slightly better data. So certainly a lot of the predictive stuff that we've seen come out recently have shown that, even in like the medical space where especially with like COVID, you're seeing like diagnostics that, where they say like, oh, a machine can diagnose someone's lungs and tell them whether they have COVID or not by looking at an X-ray better than a human, right? So these are cool things where we can optimize and put computers in a place where computers can do better and humans can do better. Okay, other questions, comments? Yeah, Richard says, Brian, I would suggest finding one thing that would be useful if it was automated. Yeah, I think that's a good way to do it. Similar to like what I said in the talk, if you've got something at work that you can automate, right, or a task that you need to do, you can often use that as an excuse or a forcing function for you to learn some new skill or technique, right? And so if your work's like saying, hey, we need this done by some date, consider using a new technology or learning something new to do that. Okay, other questions? Yeah, Richard has another comment, even if you're not doing the dev work, you can suggest a team or group to help move it along. I think that's a really important thing that Richard's bringing up is that this notion of subject matter expertise, right? And that quote that I said, or the idea that, it's easier to teach a subject matter expert data science than to teach a data scientist subject matter expertise. If you've got deep subject matter expertise in something, you're often going to have insights that someone who's just looking at the data or a data scientist won't have. And so you can sort of guide them, and you can come up with creative techniques that or creative ways of looking at the data that they might not have considered. So I think that's also another reason to collaborate with others. And so, Brian, you might want to consider, is there a data scientist nearby, someone who's maybe using R or maybe Python or whatever, but who might be curious about the space that you're in, and maybe is a little bit stronger with the programming chops or the technical chops, right? But you have more of the subject matter expertise, and consider collaborating with them. You can sort of fill them in with your knowledge, and they can sort of do you a favor, and vice versa. Okay, other questions, comments? Yeah, Richard is full of dropping knowledge bombs here. Your knowledge is only of value if you use it or share it. I think that's great. Yeah, I mean, hoarding your knowledge doesn't really do much good. And so there are a bunch of platforms for sharing knowledge these days. And if you can leverage those, you're providing value to your network. Okay. Anyone else? Going once, going twice, sold. Okay, thanks everyone. It's been a pleasure. Really enjoyed letting me talk to you. Hopefully, in a half year or so, or the summer, things start returning somewhat to normal, and maybe I'll see you at a meetup or something. Or if you're local to Utah, if you're not, hopefully I'll see you wherever you are.
All right. Thanks again, Matt.
Yep. Thank you.
Good one.